Hi, and welcome to Extra Crunch, the playoff edition. It's week one here of the playoffs in West Tennessee. Some teams really had to travel far for week one. Some in the West Tennessee area had a bye. There were a couple that were close to home we decided to highlight for you. We started out in Class 1A as Lake County traveled to Humboldt. It was a rematch of a game earlier this year that Humboldt barely got out of alive. We then came into town for Division 2A as USJ was hosting Davidson Academy. Finally headed south in Class 4A as Greenbrier was heading to Lexington. Check it out. The two teams met back on October 11th. Humboldt jumped out to a big lead before Lake County made a second half resurgence, but Humboldt would take it 31-28. The Falcons, trying to avoid history repeating themselves, scored on the first drive of the game. However, the two-point conversion was no good, so the first score was Lake County 6, Humboldt nothing. And that's when the Vikings took over. Humboldt drove the length of the field on the next drive to tie the game up at 6 after a blocked PAT. They then went on a scoring drive, finishing the half, leading over Lake County 29-6. They put it on in the second half as your final score was Humboldt 36, Lake County 14. Humboldt will play Dresden next week in the Class 1A playoffs. In Division 2A action, Davidson Academy traveled to University School of Jackson. Both teams seemed to get the scoring out of the way in the first half. The Bruins got out to an early 14-0 lead before Davidson Academy would score twice to get it to 14-13 at the half. Neither team could score in the third quarter. USJ would finally pull away with a late touchdown in the fourth quarter. Your final is USJ 21, Davidson Academy 13. The Bruins have to travel across the state next week as they will play Knoxville-Webb. Scoring was at a premium Friday night as two of the better defensive teams in Class 4A squared off when Greenbrier headed to Lexington. Lexington would score the only touchdown in the first half as the Tigers took a 7-0 lead into the locker room. Tigers would put one more on in the third quarter and add a late score in the fourth to blank Greenbrier. Your final was 21-0. Lexington travels to White House next week in Class 4A action. And to get you updated on the full playoff picture around West Tennessee, Brewston knocked off Gleason in Class 1A action. Brewston will play Union City next week. Of course, we talked Humboldt knocked off Lake County, so Humboldt and Dresden will face off. Class 2A action, Forest barely squeaked by Riverside. Riverside season now over. So Forest will play Adamsville next week. Trenton Peabody all over Hillcrest. Be a good matchup next week as TCA will host the Golden Tide. Mitchell out of Memphis knocked off Halls 28-14, so Mitchell will play the Mustangs of Huntington next week. Class 3A, Lewis County 41-0 over Fairleigh. And Camden knocked off Manassas out of Memphis 35-13. So Camden and Lewis County will play next week. Hickman County knocked off South Gibson. South Gibson still looking for that first playoff win. Not able to get it this season. But Hickman County and Westview will play next week as Westview knocked off JCM 19-13 was your final there. Class 4A action, Pearl Cone over Maplewood 30-14. And Giles County over Chester County 47-14. So Giles County and Pearl Cone will play next week. Of course, we mentioned Lexington over Greenbrier. Lexington will play White House in Middle Tennessee as White House knocked off Page 35-25. Tresvant blanked Haywood 34-0. And Liberty knocked off mine and producer Tracie Simer's alma mater, Craigmont, 56-37. So the Crusaders and Tresment will meet next week in Class 4A action. Big upset here as Northside actually traveled to Covington. It was back and forth the entire time, but Northside comes out the victor 32-29. Dyersburg knocked off Crockett County 28-7. It actually wasn't that close, so read about that in Jackson Sun, jacksonsun.com. But you've got a Dyersburg Northside matchup that should be a really good one next week. In Class 5A, the shootout of the night, Melrose of Memphis knocked off Hardin County 60-50 was your final there. Ridgeway knocked off Dyer County 42-19. So back to Memphis they go as Melrose and Ridgeway will play each other. And of course we mentioned in Division 2A, Davidson Academy fell to USJ. So USJ heads across the state to face probably one of the best teams in the state in Knox Webb. Thanks for tuning in this week. Check us out online. We've got scores and game stories going up as we speak. And also check us out in the print edition tomorrow on newsstands. Thanks for tuning in to jacksonsun.com. We'll see you next week.